You can record everything with this dash cam because it has 3 cameras. Let's check it out. Dave Taylor here, and I want to talk about dash cams. Again, it turns out these are really important devices that honestly probably should just be built into all cars at this point. High-end cars, you can actually have them include a dash cam, but for most cars, you're going to be putting in something of your own. That's what this is. This is the Vantrue N4S 3-channel 1440p dash cam. And as you can see, it has a cute little 3.2-inch display, and it has a lot of cameras. So this one is pointing in at the cabin. Perfect if you have, for example, Uber, or you're driving for a Lyft or something. This gives you the ability to record what's going on in the car for later analysis as needed. And then on the other side is the forward-facing camera, which of course is probably the most important of the 3. And this one, I have added the optional polarizing filter, and that proves to be really important so you don't get reflections from the interior of your front windshield. That's something you can add later. Talk about that in a second. And then there's a third camera, that's this guy, and this is the rear-facing camera with a very simple mount system. I can show you here. You just basically put it on your rear window, adjust that angle so that it's level and pointing directly out the back. And then as you can see, there's a very short cable because that connects to a very long cable that then connects to the dash cam. How does the dash cam stay on the front? That's this. This is the front mount. And you'll notice that the parts that are sticky have partial red tape on them. That's because I install these temporarily as a reviewer. Normally, you would take all of the red tape off so you would get the maximum suction. But honestly, even with this 60% still covered by the plastic, this was strong enough that the camera never moved or never wiggled or never was wobbly. So that was great. And it's super easy to work with because you just basically, let's see if I can get this the right orientation. You just basically clip it on. And so now you can see how that whole assembly looks. And in fact, here's a photo of it mounted in my car with the display screen turned on. How do you power the whole thing? That's another cable. That's this one. So this one includes a 12-volt adapter, aka cigarette lighter adapter, and on the end of it there's a USB-A plug. You can see what that looks like in my Mazda when it was all plugged in. And there's a user guide, which is very helpful, but there's also a little shortcut, and this just basically shows you here's what to plug in where, so you don't end up plugging this into the rear camera port and then wonder where the heck your rear camera plugs into. So okay, so there's a lot of stuff. I'm going to come back. We're going to talk about this more, but I know what you really want is some footage. So let's start with some daytime footage. And yes, I'm speeding this up. And then we'll look at some nighttime footage. Let's switch from front view to rear view. And now let's just look in the cabin just for a minute or two. Let's switch to nighttime. Again, let's look at that rear view. And here's nighttime cabin view. I think the footage it captures is crystal clear. It does a really nice job, and that's because they're using the Sony Starvis 2 sensor, and that is the hardware that's actually converting the signal from the lens to digital data for storage. And the Starvis 2 is well known as doing a really good job in low light conditions. But I want to tell you a little bit about the specs of these cameras. So the front-facing camera, this is the one that would be in front of the car, showing you where you're going. And that is 1944p, so that's almost 2K. And it's a 158-degree field of view. Again, I have the optional polarizing filter added. And then the camera on the rear, which is this one. So this is a 1440p, and this is a 160-degree field of view. And those fields of view are really important because you don't want it to have a very narrow view and then have things happening on the side. So you're driving in a lane and someone like comes from the lane over and pass or like changes lanes into your vehicle. You want to capture that whole event. So you really want that wide field of view. And then finally, the interior camera is also 1440p, and it is a 165-degree field of view. And worth noting is it also includes infrared night vision, so it should be able to record a pretty clean image even in nighttime. So you don't normally drive with your interior lights on, so it's important that they have thought that through. So we have the Starvis sensor from Sony. We have the charger with that USB-A. We also have a USB-A to USB-C cable. Not exactly sure what that's for. They did include a Hardwire kit. And the Hardwire kit, this is important. This is when you actually like run the wires into your electrical system. So rather than plugging it into that little adapter, you actually have it hardwired into the car. The benefit of that is that this can then be a 24/7 parking sentry. They have what's called parking mode. So if something happens to your car while it's parked and off, it'll actually record that. So you could go back later and say, oh, so it was that kid from next door who took a baseball bat to my rear tail light. You know, so hopefully that doesn't happen to you, but you can only do that if it's hardwired. So you would have to acquire this additional kit. Let's see, it does have voice control, this device, and it's interesting what languages it supports. It supports English, Russian, Chinese, French, and Japanese. Notably missing there, Spanish. I don't know whether that's coming soon, but you don't need voice control. I didn't use that for mine. And it will also, I should point out, it also has 4 buttons on the bottom, but when you're looking at it, it's really hard to know what those buttons are. And so I found that I didn't use them either because I used the app. So now let's switch, and I'm going to show you the app, and this is going to be a couple of minutes of demo, but I'll narrate what I'm doing so you can see. It does a really nice job, but it's a very typical Dashcam app, so it is a little complicated with the interface. I'm going to start by connecting the device. And I am within about 15 inches. And there we are. So on the top, you can see the live connection. So stop the recording. So now I can click on the gear icon on the top right. And that gets us to settings. So we have record settings. And you can see we have 3 times 1440p, which is greater than HD. Standard image quality, 1-minute loops, infrared is on auto, so all sorts of settings here, quite a lot of settings actually. And let's go back and go down that other alley, which is system setup. And very handy that it synchronizes time with your phone, so your dash cam will always be correct. And an interesting setting here is the format reminder, is that it recommends that every 15 days to 1 month you actually reformat the card. So obviously when you do that, you're going to lose everything that's saved on there. There are a bunch of other settings. We'll just leave those alone. Let's go back. And what we want to do is we want to see the recordings. So now we should be able to browse what's on the SD card. And this is always the Achilles heel of dash cams, because by its very nature, it is going to be slow because video is a lot, and this is 3x because there's 3 cameras. So let's go normal video. And those were pretty snappy, so let's see here. Let's try this one. And, well, that is super uninteresting, so let's try if we can find one where something's actually happening. remember there, every 1 minute we're getting a new recording, so it's going to be a lot of recordings here. One of these should be interesting. Let's try this one. Okay, so the audio that we're hearing, let me turn the volume down. The audio we're hearing is the audiobook I was listening to. So this gives us the footage, and we can zoom in, and now it's sideways. And that's very clean, and it was actually very quick to load, which is nice. And if I want to save this onto my phone, I can just tap the down arrow. And this is lightning fast, actually, compared to other dash cams I've used. But again, remember, it's taking 20 seconds for us to download 1 minute's worth of video here. And finally, now it's actually getting some GPS data so that it can show us where the recording was, but I'm not in a great cell zone, so there we go. There's the rest of the map. So pretty cool. And if you look at the tiny red dot, it actually is showing where I was and what direction I was traveling. So that is pretty cool. So let's back up. And those are all the video segments. And then I have 3 collision videos. I'm not sure what that's about, because I have not had any collisions, but it looks like it's recorded. And you can look on the top and see the time. And so if we pick one, let's pick this one, and I'm going to pause. So that is showing us an ostensible collision. I have absolutely no idea. Pretty sure I didn't collide with anyone there. So all very easy to work with, and mobile local folder. And then let's just see real quick what these other buttons are. So this one that looks like a little measuring stick, or, okay, so that's mileage statistics. So 22 minutes and 59 seconds of driving, total 45 minutes. Oh, it tracks altitude. Looks like I'm at about 5,000 feet, which is more or less accurate. And lowest and highest altitude, average speed, total mileage, start location, end location. Very cool, actually. And then this, I assume, superimposes a grid over things. Yep. Not super useful. Let's stop the recording. And then the microphone turns off the microphone. I can switch which view is primary in the preview above. So that's now primary, what's behind me. And you can see there's some people walking towards me with a baby and 2 dogs. And then the button on the left gave me a snapshot, and it's back to recording. So let's go back all the way to the beginning. So we're here, and there's a little more I can do here, but I think that's plenty of demo. So you can see it's actually quite easy to work with, and I think that the download speed's quite remarkable. It did download pretty quickly because that's using the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. So one of the great things about this is it has a more modern Wi-Fi chip. A lot of them are limited to slow Wi-Fi connections with your phone and the app. So you're using the Dashcam, and it's kind of a nightmare to actually download a decent amount of footage. So I appreciate that, but still, even with that, I will point out that on this end, there is that MicroSD card. Again, I had to purchase that separately. And here's something really cool. You can put up to a 1 terabyte card in here. So you can record a cross-country drive with all 3 cameras simultaneously, and then go back later and look for, like, the cherries, the most interesting bits of footage that you have. But my experience is if you just pop that MicroSD card and then you use the little micro SD to SD card adapter, which is in this little plastic thing, You can just plug it directly into your computer, and it's a million times easier to work with. I know some people just want to work with the app, and that's fine. But my experience is that I use these apps to get all the settings right, to make sure I have everything how I want it configured. And then I use it to preview the video footage so I can adjust the cameras. Particularly important with that rear camera, because if you have it pointed like this, you're going to get a beautiful view of the sky, but you're not going to see what's happening behind you. So you got to adjust this once it's mounted on your rear windshield or your hatch or whatever, and then you adjust the camera until it's perfectly level with the ground. So having those in the app are really 99% of what I use it for. You also saw in the demo that it does have built-in GPS. Takes a little while to pull down its map data, but pretty darn cool feature. And it has something they call plate picks. And the idea of that is that it makes the license plates on the vehicles around you crisper and easier to read. And let's see, I think that's pretty much everything. It does include a little install kit with these little hooks and stuff to make your wires neat. And the idea of this is that a lot of people will actually, especially from the front to the rear, they will actually run the wire along the edge of the top of their car and then run it down behind where no one can see it to make it as invisible as possible. Obviously, that is superior to what I did, which was just have a bunch of wires hanging down. But a lot of people with dash cams just have a bunch of wires hanging down. So if you're motivated, you can do that. It does come with extra mount systems and all sorts of different stuff to make sure you can get it exactly where you want. And you might move it to a newer car someday. So all of that's covered in the box. There's even a little cloth so that you can wipe and make sure that that area of your glass is clean before you try to stick something to it. I hopefully don't need to say this, but if you have a really dirty interior window, then it's not going to stick as well. So take the time to do at least spot cleaning. But I mean, seriously, if you're spot cleaning a window, just clean the whole darn window. So that's everything. There's a lot of stuff here. And I will say, just lengthwise, this is the charging cable, and it's 11.5 feet, which might sound really long. If you're just having it hang down and go straight into your plug, it's really long. But if you're running it along the edge of your interior and then trying to hide it as best you can, and you could use these, for example, to have it run just behind your glove compartment, then that 11 feet might not even be long enough. I think it would be long enough for the vast majority of vehicles. The one that's more questionable is this. This is the rear camera cable, and it's 20 feet long. Again, that sounds really long, but how big is your car? If you have something like an Expedition, getting from that dash cam on the front windshield all the way back past 3 rows, past the cargo compartment to the back window, and having that tucked away and neat so the kids don't pull it out every time they get in the car, well, 20 feet probably will do the job, but if you have a real boat of a car, then you might need to get an even longer cable. I think this looks like just USB-C to USB-C, so my guess is you could try using a different data cable, but those are the lengths. This is everything I got here. Now let me tell you my impressions of this. I was very favorably impressed. It was easy to install, easy to understand how everything works. The only thing I had to figure out was where to plug in what. And it's important to note that the windshield mount is where you plug in the power. So not only is this connected to the main dash cam, but it's feeding power to the dash cam, which then, through different wires, is feeding power to all of the other peripherals. So once you figure that out, then you know that this actual cable that connects the rear camera to the rest of the assembly is the other USB-C plug on this side. The other part there is that micro SD card slot. So it's pretty straightforward, really. And then again, go into the app. I did find that because I have wireless CarPlay, I had to disable that because my phone, I have an iPhone 17 Pro, it's really aggressively wanting to get back to Apple CarPlay, and that occasionally had it drop signal with the dash cam because they were competing to see who got to use my Wi-Fi. Yes, if that sounds annoying, it was annoying. But once I disabled Apple CarPlay, then it always worked like a breeze. And then once I was using it, this was mostly during configuration and pairing, but once I was in regular usage, then I didn't find there were any problems. Again, I defer to popping out that micro SD card, using the adapter, and then looking at the footage on my computer directly. I mean, who wouldn't want to have a 15 or 16 or 20 or 35-inch screen to look at this footage rather than that tiny little 4-inch wide screen on your phone? Well, maybe you prefer your phone. Either way, that's everything. This is an absolute keeper. If you don't need the interior camera, then I would look at Vantrue solutions that offer you out the front and out the back. And remember, in all cases, it's recording everything going on in the cabin too. So from a privacy perspective, you might want to think about, if you're having very intimate conversations with your children about, certain things going on at school or something, there is now a recorded record of that you might or might not want. One option would be to mute that microphone or to simply turn off the dash cam. Probably don't want to turn off the dash cam, especially since if it's a big, heavy, dramatic conversation, you might not be driving your best because you might be distracted. But that's everything. This is definitely one to check out. I think Vantrue is one of the leaders in dash cams right now, and this shows all of their attention to detail. We do need to talk price. Before we get there, I'm going to invite you to subscribe to my channel. Click or tap on that subscribe button, hit that bell icon for notifications of my new content. And if you found this of value, I absolutely appreciate a thumbs up. Just click on that thumbs up icon. And if there's something you wish I would have demonstrated and didn't, then leave that as a comment. And I'll know that for my next dash cam review, I'll ramp it up even a little more. Sweet. All of this is actually the Vantrue N4S 3-channel 1440p dash cam, and it is $249.99 at Amazon.com. That front polarizing filter you will need to acquire separately. That's $19. And if you want to get a Vantrue 128 gig or 256 micro SD card, you can get them off Amazon too. My 256 meg card is $49. So a little bit of an upsell there to get all the pieces that you want. You would also need to buy the Hardwire kit if that's how you want to mount it. But once you get it all done, you're done. And it's really a set and forget sort of device, exactly as you would hope. So you just basically forget you have it until something happens, and then you have all this footage, and it's just so great to know that you have that. It's a great safety net. So that's everything I got. I will hope to catch you in my next video.